when the saints go marching in.
The world remembers Maya Angelou as a towering poet, activist, and the voice of courage. But behind the wisdom, the awards, and the standing ovations was a woman who called herself something far simpler: a mother. It's a contradiction that defined her life. To millions, she was Maya Angelou, the writer of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, the speaker whose words could move presidents and crowds to tears. But at home, she was mom to one boy, her only child, Guy Johnson. She once said, "My son is the best thing I ever did," without question. And though the world saw her brilliance, Guy saw her sacrifices. The late nights working odd jobs, the risks she took to carve a career in the arts, and the unwavering love that held them together. So what really happened to Maya Angelou's child? And how did her role as a mother shape not just her family, but the legendary voice she gave to the world? Maya Angelou was born Marguerite Annie Johnson on April 4th, 1928, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her childhood was a turbulent one. When her parents' marriage broke apart, 3-year-old Maya and her older brother, Bailey Jr., were placed on a train alone and sent to live with their grandmother in the small, segregated town of Stamps, Arkansas. It was in Stamps that Maya first learned about both the cruelty of racism and the strength of faith and community. The church, hymns, and oral storytelling traditions of the South became a powerful force in her young life. But the pain of being uprooted, abandoned, and later experiencing trauma at the hands of adults left lasting wounds. She fell silent for nearly 5 years, barely speaking a word, believing her voice carried danger. During that silence, she devoured books, memorized poetry, and developed the inner world that would one day pour out in verse. Years later, she would write, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." For Maya, those untold stories of her childhood, the scars of segregation, the silence, the loneliness, would eventually shape the extraordinary power of her art. But at just 16 years old, Maya's life took a new, unexpected turn. In 1945, she gave birth to her only child, a son she named Guy Johnson. She was still a teenager, with dreams but no clear path, and suddenly the responsibility of raising a child alone. For many, it might have been the end of possibility, but for Maya, it was the beginning of her fight to create a life filled with purpose. She would later reflect, "And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel." The birth of my son saved me. He gave me a reason to live, a reason to try. Motherhood was never simple. Maya worked tirelessly to provide for her baby, cooking, waitressing, dancing in nightclubs, even breaking barriers as the first black female streetcar conductor in San Francisco. The pay was meager, the hours were long, and yet she carried on. She often strapped Guy to her hip or carried him with her to jobs, learning how to balance exhaustion with ambition. "I was a single mother with a baby on my hip, and dreams bigger than I could carry," she admitted years later. "But I knew I couldn't quit. Quitting wasn't an option." Those early years were a crucible. Every setback and every long shift taught her resilience. Every night when she returned to Guy, no matter how tired she was, she would read to him, sing to him, or simply hold him close. To her, being his mother wasn't an obstacle to her dreams. It was the very reason she kept chasing them. This unshakable bond with Guy and the determination to build a better life for him would become the foundation of everything Maya Angelou accomplished, as an artist, as an activist, and as one of the most celebrated voices of the 20th century. By her late teens and early 20s, Maya Angelou was determined to build a life not just for herself, but for her son Guy. Her natural talent and charisma opened doors in the performing arts. She began as a dancer and singer in San Francisco, joining the vibrant jazz and calypso scene of the late 1940s. By the early 1950s, she was touring internationally, first with a production of Porgy and Bess that took her across Europe, and later with her own calypso-inspired shows. On stage, Maya was unforgettable. Her presence was magnetic, elegant, fierce, and impossible to ignore. Audiences in Paris, Rome, and London were enthralled by her deep voice and powerful movements. She later recalled with humor, "I was always trying to make a living for me and my son, and if I could sing or dance my way to it, that's what I would do." But through it all, Maya never separated her art from her motherhood. Wherever she went, Guy went too. When she toured internationally, Guy often traveled by her side, sometimes doing schoolwork backstage or napping in hotel lobbies while his mother rehearsed. She believed exposing him to the world was one of the best educations she could give. She once said, "I never left my son behind because I knew he was my anchor. He grounded me even as I chased my dreams." In 1960, Maya made one of the boldest moves of her life. She relocated with Guy to Ghana. The decision was both artistic and political. Ghana had recently gained independence under President Kwame Nkrumah, and the nation was a hub for Pan-African thinkers, artists, and activists. Maya quickly immersed herself in this world, becoming friends with towering figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, who was spending his final years in Ghana, and working alongside political leaders and intellectuals who were shaping a new vision of Africa. For Guy, Ghana was equally transformative. He attended school there, studied with local students, and developed a sense of global awareness few children of his age could imagine. Maya made sure he was never just the son of Maya Angelou, but rather a young man with his own identity and education. Yet balancing the dual demands of career and motherhood was never simple. Maya admitted in later interviews that she often felt torn between rehearsals, performances, political work, and the quiet moments of reading to her son at night. "There were nights when I'd be exhausted from a show, but I'd still sit and listen to Guy talk about his day. That was sacred time," she said. Their years in Ghana were marked by triumphs and trials. Guy suffered a serious car accident there, one that left him temporarily paralyzed. For Maya, it was one of the darkest moments of her life. "I prayed, I begged, I bargained with God," she said. "Nothing mattered to me but my son." Thankfully, Guy recovered, but the experience reinforced the depth of their bond. By the late 1960s, Maya had lived through enough hardship and triumph to know that her story, and her son's story woven into it, was something the world needed to hear. No longer content to simply entertain, she began writing what would become one of the most groundbreaking autobiographies in American literature. By the late 1960s, Maya Angelou had already lived several lifetimes. Dancer, singer, actress, activist, world traveler, and always a single mother. But it was her decision to take all of those experiences and put them on the page that changed everything. In 1969, she released her first autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The book was revolutionary. For the first time, a black woman was telling her story with brutal honesty. The childhood trauma, the silence she kept for years, the crushing weight of racism in the South, and the miraculous rebirth of her voice through art, books, and love. It was part memoir, part poetry, part testimony, a story that refused to look away from pain, but also celebrated survival. Critics and readers alike were stunned. James Baldwin, a close friend, praised Maya's courage, saying, "She freed herself, and in doing so, she freed others." The book became an international bestseller, was nominated for a National Book Award, and was eventually translated into more than 30 languages. For Maya, the writing was personal, but it was also deeply tied to her son. "I wrote the book for Guy," she said. I wanted him to know who I was, where I came from, and the battles I had fought, so that he would understand the strength that lived in him. Guy later shared how reading those pages transformed his view of his mother. To me, she was just Mom, the one who made me do my homework and gave me advice. But in her words, I saw the weight she carried and the power she turned that weight into. It made me proud, but it also made me protective. The success of Caged Bird launched Maya Angelou into a new role, not just an entertainer, but one of America's most important voices. She would go on to publish 6 more autobiographies, chronicling her life through fame, activism, and motherhood, as well as countless poems and essays. Her words became rallying cries for resilience, justice, and the celebration of Black identity. But no matter how much acclaim she earned, Guy remained at the center of her universe. She often reminded interviewers, "Everything I have done with him in mind." When asked how she balanced being a mother with being an artist, Maya dismissed the idea of conflict. "There is no conflict," she said. "My child was never in my way. He was my way." That fierce devotion became the defining feature of her life. To the world, Maya Angelou was a poet, a performer, a teacher. To Guy, she was a mother who turned her struggles into stories and her stories into strength. While the world often saw Maya Angelou as the towering figure, her son, Guy Johnson, quietly carved a life and career of his own, one that reflected both her influence and his independence. Born Clyde Guy Johnson Jr. in 1945, he grew up moving from city to city and even continent to continent alongside his mother. But as he grew older, he deliberately chose a path that gave him his own identity. "I never wanted to be in her shadow," he once said, "but I wanted to carry her lessons." Guy became a writer in his own right. His debut novel, Standing at the Scratch Line, 2001, was an ambitious story of a Black man's journey through early 20th century America, touching on family, loyalty, violence, and survival. Critics praised it for its vivid storytelling and sense of history, and it marked him as a serious, literary voice. He followed it up with another novel, Echoes of a Distant Summer, 2006, further cementing his talent. But while literature was his passion, Guy also lived a rich and varied life. He worked in management positions, ran businesses, and engaged in community work, both in the U.S. and abroad. Friends and colleagues described him as thoughtful, witty, and deeply grounded, qualities that echoed his mother's teachings but were very much his own. Through all of it, his relationship with Maya remained central. They were not just mother and son, but collaborators and companions. He sometimes helped manage her career, and she often leaned on him for advice. In later interviews, Maya admitted, "Guy is the best man I know. He has taught me as much as I ever taught him." When asked how he saw his mother, Guy was equally candid. "The world sees Maya Angelou. I see Mom. I see the woman who made sacrifices, who sometimes stumbled, but who always got back up and pulled me with her. That's the story I carry." In 2022, Guy Johnson passed away at the age of 77, just days after what would have been his mother's 94th birthday. Tributes poured in, remembering not only the son of Maya Angelou, but also a man who had built his own legacy of words, wisdom, and resilience. His death reminded many that behind Maya's towering presence was always the bond of a mother and son, a bond that shaped both of their lives and work. Maya Angelou's passing in 2014 marked the end of an extraordinary life, but her voice has never gone silent. Tributes poured in from presidents, poets, musicians, and millions of readers who had been shaped by her words. President Barack Obama, who awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011, said, "She was a storyteller for all humanity. She had the ability to remind us of our common humanity and to lift us up when we were low." Throughout her career, Maya received more than 30 honorary degrees, Grammy Awards for her spoken word albums, a National Book Award nomination, and the NAACP Image Award. She was also celebrated globally, from Ghana to France, as a cultural ambassador who blended art with activism. But perhaps the greatest memorial to Maya Angelou is not found in trophies or certificates, but in the spaces and generations her work continues to inspire. Schools, libraries, and cultural centers across the United States bear her name. In 2022, the U.S. Mint even honored her as the first Black woman to appear on the American Quarter, a symbol of her enduring influence on the nation. Her son, Guy Johnson, played a crucial role in preserving her legacy during his lifetime. He ensured her works remained in print, her archives protected, and her name connected to educational initiatives. After his passing in 2022, his children and the Angelou Johnson family have continued that work, sponsoring literacy programs, poetry readings, and public celebrations of Maya's birthday each year. Maya often said, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." That truth lingers in every classroom where her poems are taught, in every performance of her words, and in every person who found courage in her story. Her family, especially her grandchildren, speak proudly of carrying that torch. They describe her not only as a cultural icon, but as a grandmother who baked, laughed, and told them stories late into the night. To them, she was both the global Maya Angelou and simply Grandma Maya. And so, the legacy of Maya Angelou lives on, in her books, in her music, in her activism, and most of all, in the lives of her family who continue to keep her flame burning bright. Maya Angelou's story is one of resilience, art, and the unbreakable bond between mother and son. Her words continue to echo across generations, and her family carries her light forward. But what do you think? Is Maya Angelou's greatest legacy her powerful art, or the family she raised and inspired? Let us know in the comments. And if you love discovering the real stories behind history's legends, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.